Hello, everyone. So my name is Rafael Oliveira. I work at Santarém Polytechnic University, School of Sports in Rio Maior, Portugal. And I also belong to the Research Center in Sports Science, Health Science and Human Development. So the topic of this session is about optimizing athletic performance, monitoring and controlling training load for enhanced sports longevity. So I left in here just a small slide where you can find more information about myself. If you have any additional thoughts or you want to exchange some ideas with me, feel free to contact me by email, which will appear again on the last slide of this presentation. You can also search for my scientific networks and also check some information about my academic education or professional experience and so on. So since this session is a short period of time, I'm going to go deep to our main topics. So basically, as you can see, this is a classic figure that explains the theoretical framework of the training process. So I not want to explain this in detail, but the main idea to introduce this topic, basically, we have internal and external load through different kind of metrics, and the quantification of this kind of metrics allow us to know the training and the match effects produced in the player. Of course, there are many variables, as you probably are aware, that can influence all these types of load, the different types of exercises, the training goals of those exercises or of those sessions, and also the performance that a player can achieve itself during these type of sessions or even during the match. So, of course, during this load monitoring, we have conducted a systematic review some years ago in 2021, basically to check how many studies used and what kind of metrics they used. So as you can see, and this is not updated to the real year 2025, but basically at the time, as you can see, different kind of total distance or different kind of zones or thresholds running distance, and also together with the rating of perceived exertion, together with some wellness and recovery questionnaires, and also the accelerations and decelerations in different kind of ways were the most used metrics in terms of internal and external load. Of course, please consider that wellness and recovery are not internal load measures, but there were some studies that consider it, and that's the reason why we include them in this figure. So this is just for you to understand what kind of metrics we are talking about. So as mentioned, and once again, wellness and well-being are not considered load measures. They are considered wellness or well-being measures, but still, together with internal and external load metrics, they can give us extra information about the player, different kind of perceptions. The majority of these metrics are collected with questionnaires. As you can see, these are some examples. I'm not going to explain all of them because I don't have the time, but if you want, you can check this review of Nasi et al. It was produced in 2017, and it includes many of those questionnaires, at least those that are more, I would say, complete or with more information. However, in my perspective, and considering the large amount of metrics that we can control and we can collect in football or in soccer, as you prefer, I would suggest to consider the upper index, which basically allow us to quantify the sleep quality of the night before, the stress, fatigue, and muscle soreness before beginning a new session or a new competition. Or if you prefer another metric, you can also use the McLean questionnaire, or also known as wellness questionnaire, which includes an additional metric, which is the mood, the state of the mood of a player, which can also influence its performance during the training or during the match. So I believe that putting external, internal load, and also some wellness measures, it will give us additional information that we can consider to adjust our training sessions and to understand if a player is accumulating too much fatigue and should decrease, for instance, some exercises, some volume, some intensity, or the other way, if we need to put extra exercises to increase volume or to increase intensity in order to get more readiness for the next match, the next competition. However, considering the different metrics, how can we analyze them? Because there are many, many more variables that I didn't explain, and you probably already know some of those variables. So I put in this slide some examples that we should consider before we proceed for an analysis. So let's start first by introducing the individual analysis or group analysis, because players are different, and I'm not talking about if they start a match or not, because that is also going to influence. I'm not talking about different positions they can occupy in the field, but players are different persons from each other. They have different physiological and physical characteristics, and for that reason, they should always be monitored and analyzed in an individual manner. Of course, when we produce science, we need more than one player many times, and that's why the majority of the studies include at least one team. But still, when we are producing some reports to deliver to the coach, it will be better to give specific information in an individual point of view. Of course, there are the other subgroups that we can analyze, and also we should consider the different age groups, because let's imagine just one example. If we are considering to move a player in under 18, under 21 division to the first team, we should already get this type of information of load monitoring or wellness monitoring to see if, at least from the physical and physiological point of view, the player is already ready to move to the first division. Because if those capacities are not achieved yet, it will be better to not move him. Of course, I'm not including here the technical or tactical aspects, but these also must be considered, of course. Along with this type of analysis in different kind of subgroups, we should consider other other contextual variables. For instance, if we are analyzing a training or a match, during the training there are many types of different exercises. We can use, for instance, a small sided game with specific characteristics or constraints. That all of that is going to influence the load that we are implying to the player. If we are analyzing matches, we should consider the official matches or the friendly and training matches, because all of that can influence the load that we are applying. Other contextual variables as the match period, if we are playing or analyzing the first with the second half, the result of the match location is also going to influence and sometimes influence the wellness and well-being of a player. The opponent's level is also going to influence the load and our tactics and all logistics. The team formation that we are using, or if we change or not, the ball possession. So there are many contextual variables to include and to take in consideration when we are analyzing load. Of course, other contextual variable is the regular weeks, which usually include just one match, versus congested weeks with more than one match per week. So at least in the professional point of view, this should happen sometimes. But how can we analyze this type of data? So there are many ways. This slide just shows some examples, but there are, of course, additional ways, other ways. So we have different ways to analyze internal load or external load. Internal load could be multiplied by the duration, by the rating of perceived exertion. We could analyze the load in an acute way or a chronic way. Basically, the acute way is the sum of the daily load of the week. We could analyze the weekly load by the average. Basically, we need to divide the acute load by the numbers of the training days. We could use other kind of index or ratios like the monotony, the training strain, the training match ratio, which is one that I liked very much because it will give us information if the total amount of training that we are getting during the week is equivalent or superior to a match. Sometimes is inferior to a match, which is maybe on purpose, but sometimes maybe not. So this should be considered as well. And we also have the ratios of acute chronic workload, or if you prefer, the exponential weighted moving average, and also the worst case scenarios, which usually analyzes the most demanding phases of a match. So there are many possibilities, and just another additional information. We can use all of this analysis by using absolute or relative data. So basically, in absolute data, we include, for instance, the total distance covered during a match. Let's imagine 10,000 meters. But the relative data could be dividing those 10,000 meters by, let's say, 90 meters of play. So it will give us a number in meters per minute, which is better to compare different kind of players when they don't have, for instance, the same amount of time of play. So that could be interesting. But another review, recent, analyzed other specific information. For instance, the previous slide where I showed you absolute versus relative data, we can use just some thresholds that are usually known. For instance, let's say I've been running between 14 and 19 kilometers an hour, or sometimes it also very high speed running considered with values higher than 19.8 kilometers an hour, and for sometimes sprinting, for instance, above 25 kilometers an hour. But these thresholds that are already known, and sometimes they are not specific from player to player. So how can we change? So this review analyzed many possibilities, and they basically found out that some players use the maximal sprint speed obtained during specific tests or obtained during the match, and sometimes other situations. As you can see, there are many possibilities here. So sometimes they use these numbers of maximal sprint speed. Sometimes they use the respiratory compensation threshold or even the second ventilatory threshold to not use common thresholds and to specify for the player itself. So this is another possibility. It depends on the scenario of your team or on the goals that the coach wants for his team. Another very important aspect is the difference between monitoring versus assessing, because usually we monitorize every session and every match, while assessing includes different kind of tests, for instance, cardiorespiratory, agility, strength, and other tests. So this information, together with the load monitoring and wellness monitoring, it will give us more and relevant information about our players. These periodical assessments should be conducted and can include many of these areas, for instance, the anthropometric and body composition variables, some specific field tests, cardiorespiratory tests, strength tests, psychological tests, and also some blood samples or immunological or microbiological assessments. So when should we do all of this? So basically, I already explained the part of monitoring because it's every day, but for the assessments, it's not every day and should be periodical during some specific times of the year. For instance, let me just say my opinion. We can include these in the beginning of a pre-season and maybe in the end of the pre-season to see the evolution of a player. And during the in-season, we should apply it at least 2, 3, maybe 4 times more. It will depend on the context of the team, on the number of the technical staff members, and the tools that we have to control of all of this information. But let me show you just uh, 2 studies that will give us more information, for instance, about the cardiorespiratory fitness test. And the reason I show you or I select these tests, it's because they are they give us fatigue, too many fatigue sometimes in a physical and physiological point of view. And for instance, this is just an example that will give us information and speculate that we can apply, for instance, other type of tests for the agility tests, I don't know, strength tests, and also some training sessions during the in-season. So let's see this example. So first, this was conducted in youth male soccer players in about 17, 18, 19 years old. So basically, we applied 3 different tests. We applied the 30 IFT, the yo-yo intermittent recovery test, and also the VAM-VAL test. And for you to understand what this figure is showing, just consider the following. The black bars represent the session load, while the specific bars represents each one of these tests that I talked about. So as you can see, distance have different running speeds, only between 11 and 19 kilometers an hour. These type of tests were higher than the normal session, and they also were equivalent to a match. But these type of values were never achieved with running distance higher than 19 kilometers an hour, which is very good to understand how much physical demands this type of tests require from a player in comparison with a match or with a normal training. So this second figure show us that accelerations and decelerations were not achieved at any session or match by these 3 different types of cardiorespiratory fitness tests, which again supports the idea that we can apply them. And finally, this figure is just about the peak speed, and as you can see, the peak speed of the different and usual training and match sessions was never achieved during these tests. So in the second article, we basically applied the same type of analysis, but in this case, we used heart rate measures to understand the physiological point of view. And in this case, we found that heart rate average was achieved in this type of tests, but heart rate peak was not, which is again a very interesting knowledge about the intensity that we can get during these tests. Moreover, the different heart rate zones and the TRIMP were not achieved when compared with normal training or match. So basically, both articles together got the same conclusion, which is that it's possible to apply this type of tests in training without adding too much load for players. The same is speculated for other types of tests, such as strength, agility, and others. So we can manage when we can apply this. It depends if the coach and their staff wants to apply it, because there are no extra or uh, specific extra and additional fatigue that we are producing with this type of tests. So, of course, like in load monitoring, there are many physical and physiological tests. I already showed you in some slides before. This slide is also taken from a study that we did, and that we applied different kinds of body composition, jump ability tests, sprint tests, change of direction tests, and also yo-yo tests. So it's all possible to apply. And this was another recent article 2 years ago on women, female professional soccer players, where we applied also many bioimpedance impedance variables to assess body composition, and also many tests related with strength, agility, sprint, cardiorespiratory fitness ability. So basically, I would like to finish our session by saying that the choice of the tests will be related with the goals of the coaches, and sometimes they are also dependent on the available tools in the club. Nonetheless, this monitorization and assessments allows the analysis of sports longevity, because it will be possible to understand when a player gets his or her peak and when the player starts to losing it. So that type of information will be crucial to adjust training and type of play in order to go further in the career. So the only way that we know what a player can do is to monitorize them and to keep controlling him, and also keep assessing in periodical times. So thank you very much. I left here some um, my scientific networks, also so my email. So if you have any questions, just feel free to ask me. Thank you very much.